All right. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to Melanin and Moonlight. I am one of your co hosts, Tyrell Collins.
And I'm Vernon Scott. Welcome, y'all. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today, Terrell?
I am doing good. It's been warmer throughout the beginning half of the week. It's been rainier through the next half. If you're, in Georgia or the Atlanta area, this weather we have is just it's unpredictable. It truly is, just like everybody's emotional state with the world right now. So
Factual. It's raining here as well. I'm a lover of the rain. It's just, I'm happy that we have multiple days of rain. Like a lot of people don't pay attention to this, especially here in the state of Georgia. When you have multiple days of rain, that's a good thing. That means things will cool down a little bit, and those following days, once the rain stops, it's not going to be as humid. But if you
mm,
just have one day of rain, I'm not going outside. I'm not doing it. Most definitely, as we approach summer, I'm just not doing it because the it's not cool enough to keep that moisture calm. It's just gonna be in the air, and I that's too much humidity. I'm walking outside, and I don't want to do it. I don't want to do
yeah.
it. Not at all.
uh,
Oh, I am so happy. Like before this, before you even came on the camera, Tyrell.
mhm.
So for those who are listening, today is Mother's Day, the day
Yeah.
we're recording this. So happy Mother's Day to all the moms out there, the spiritual moms, those on this plane as well on the next,
Yeah.
those mother figures, those want to be mothers, as well as those pursuing that, developing the fetus as we speak. Happy Mother's Day to you.
Yeah. Happy Mother's Day.
Yes, today, um, my I just consider her my adoptive mom. It's my best friend's mom. Best friend, she recently had her baby, so shout
Oh,
out to
yeah.
her, Lovina Kira. So I find out today that they're also cooking too. I was like, okay, let me go ahead and stop by there. And best friend made this cake.
Mm.
If you would have came on a little bit earlier, you would have saw me just that cake. It was so good. It was so good. It was so good. So I had to let her know. Well, I sent her a text message, but if she ever hears this episode, she knows it was good. It was good.
Oh my goodness.
Oh Lordy. But with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into these topics. Tyrell, what's been on your radar this week?
Ooh, I was sitting, of course, as people know that we've talked a little bit about, the premiere aspect of Beyond the Gates, the new, kind of Black Center soap opera. Obviously not necessarily going into the nature of the show, but just I love watching actors like do interviews. So you really get a chance to like see like their personalities like off screen and things like that. And so of course, our platform, always amplifying the nature of, queer voices. um Michael Fairman, who is over the soap network, he does a lot of, great interviews with a lot of like soap actors, of course. And recently he had on Mike Manning, who plays Smitty on Beyond the Gates, and also Brandon Claybon, who plays Martin on Beyond the Gates as well. If for anyone who doesn't know, they are an interracial gay couple around their mid 30s, who are raising two adopted teenagers on the show. And so their interview was really, really nice. I think Michael asked them some really great questions. They inserted in some great, fan service feedback. And so it was just really nice to hear them about how like their process for getting the role, things like that. And it also answers some questions for me, because I know like certain fans were not necessarily feeling them at first, because not necessarily just with I'm not really talking about like the story aspect of them, but it kind of seemed like maybe they lacked a little bit of chemistry in the beginning until they started writing them to have a little bit more soft scenes, which for me kind of was answered. One of the things that they talked about was how they met. They actually met, I think, like the day of their table read. So they didn't actually have like a, like a actor's like chemistry test and things like that. And I've always felt that chemistry is one of those things like you either have or you don't. And if you don't, then you have to figure out the nuances about, well, how do you just portray and make it work on screen? Which I feel like they've done, and I feel like they can still, do more with. But yeah, and although I really just wanted to point out how much I enjoyed their interview, they talked a lot about some great things. So, in the spirit of Mother's Day, I just wanted to talk for a moment about something that was brought up as a question that Michael Fairman asked both of them in the interview. Mike Manning and Brandon Claybon, they openly admitted that they don't have children. And so he was asking them, so what does it mean for you, not just to, of course, play, an interracial, gay couple on television, but you're also playing parents to, teenager, full blown teenagers. And something that Mike had said that struck me, he was saying that as a parent or playing a parent has allowed him to have very much an insight and retrospect into his own upbringing and parents. So he brought up the fact that when he's acting with Brandon, who plays Martin, on screen, and they may be having an argument about something, and then the kids come in, and then like the tone shifts. He's like, those moments remind me of my parents, like when they were having moments of tension or something was going on, and then I come into a room and like the tone automatically shifts because like you have to, not necessarily keep up appearance, but you have to make a safe space, good parenting. You make good safe space for your children. So I just loved how him and Brandon were bringing up, things that when you're technically not a parent, when you get to fulfill a role or you get to be in service of a role where, yeah, you do take on parental, kind of responsibilities, and no matter if that's acting or if that's in real life in other roles, that you tend to have this retrospective aspect in your thinking about like, oh wow, like yeah, this is what my mother did or this is what my father did, in those moments, and now you tend to understand those moments a lot more. So I just want to know, Vernon, for your perspective, obviously, neither one of us speaking are parents, but like have you had moments where you have found yourself like taking on like a parent, like an older figure, like parental role, and like have you had those moments, like those aha moments where it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I see why my mother may did that, I see why my dad may have did that.
I've definitely had those moments in my life, and I know I had a lot of, uh, I guess, internal challenging of like my upbringing, what I was used to, and all that in the
Mm,
process of me earning my degree, actually, because it is in marriage
mm,
and family therapy. So, of course, you get the occasional coursework that's related to family structures and parenting, but not that in detail because I wasn't focusing on that.
mm,
I was specializing in something different. But of course, you still have to have some of that basic understanding of how to like create those safe spaces and have those tough conversations amongst families. So
mm,
that made me think about, oh, okay, when I was younger and my mom may have said certain things, and that I may have taken offense to,
mm,
or what have you, it may not have actually been offensive, right? It may not
mm,
have been something that, well, in my context of reality, it just didn't align with hers, right?
mm,
It's helped me give a lot more grace to the older generation. Like I had a
mm,
conversation with a classmate once because um, like my specialty was systemic sex therapy, right?
mm,
So this fellow student, my peer, she was not as familiar with working with trans people, and her client
mm,
happened to be trans. And in having the conversation, she was like, "How do I advocate for this child when her, because I believe it was I believe the child was male to female."
Mm,
transitioning. How do I have this conversation with her to make sure that she feels seen in these sessions and not feel ostracized? And I was like, well, one of the things that you need
right.
to reflect on is how are you also creating a space for the parents to feel seen? Because
Mm,
what we tend to forget is that in these moments that of family therapy, we're trying to validate all people who are in this room. We have to create a safe space for all of them here.
yeah.
And what that safe space may look like is acknowledging that they are going through a process themselves. Like
Yes.
they recognize this child as being this person who they've given birth to and known for all these years. And now you're telling them, are they're being informed that, oh, I am not your son, I'm your daughter.
Mhm.
What impact is that having on them? Like you have to
Right.
really extend the conversation to them as well so that they get to verbalize and validate what they're experiencing. Because if we shut that off and just act as though it's not real,
Mhm.
then now they're not going to do the proper work that they need in order to really start to love their child the way that their child needs it. Because now you're making me the bad person. Now you're making me the
Mhm.
perpetrator here. And all I'm trying to do is just figure out how am I supposed to care and love for this person. So
Right.
like being in that program and aging in general has helped me see like even though this person may not have been what I needed at the time, they genuinely were doing the best with the information that they had. Now,
Right.
there are those people who may have a lot more information and did not utilize that, and it may have caused harm, and that's a different kind of conversation. But it's
Mhm.
important for us to recognize when people are actually trying,
Yes.
and how them trying may still cause harm, right? It's that conversation between impact
Right.
versus well, intention versus impact, right?
Impact, right.
But yeah, like some of those are the things, the lessons that I've learned as I've grown, as well as because I have some, what they call me their dad. I have some gay children out here. So even in that, having those conversations and really taking on a role of a figure of wisdom, even
Mhm.
though these individuals may not be much younger than me, like
Right.
probably 5 to 10 years difference. Uh, but they're still looking up to me for some guidance.
Yeah.
And sometimes in those conversations, I'm like, oh, okay, maybe if my dad may have approached this situation this way, it would not have been this much of an issue. Or
Yeah.
maybe this is a area where I could find that forgiveness that I did not
Mhm.
provide
Right.
at one point because now I get it. Now I understand it a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I tended to learn a lot about my mom when we would take road trips, especially when I was younger and just, with growing up as we were going back and forth, to, different states. And it would be during those times where I would really get to understand her perspective of life as a woman. And that's something that I beg all people to do, especially young adults, when you still have your parents with you. You have to really, well, I would say not have to, but I would hope that you would get to a place, no matter if you're on speaking terms with your parents, if you're not, to try to get to understand their story as a man, as a woman, or however they identify, because until you separate, and I know that that's hard because when we look at our parents, that's really what we see mommy and daddy, but when we stop to if we can stop for a minute to separate, that parent child aspect for a second, and you really get to understand, your mother, your father, or whoever it is your guardian was, when you get to understand their perspective as the person that they are, not as your parent or your guardian, but as the person that they are, then a lot of things start to click and make sense about why they've done what they've done, why they feel the way that they feel, and things like that. And no, it's not to provide you with I think, a justification for something or, to make excuses for anything. But again, it's to have you to understand their perspectives as the people that they are. And that's something that I've always carried with me. That no matter what my parents have done, not done, it is not a justification for me to behave in certain ways. Because as they say, when you know better, you need to try to do better. So, and again, I know that that's a lot to live up to. No, that is not meaning that, oh, of course you're going to do or I'm going to do everything perfect in life. Of course not. I'm a human being. Mistakes are a part of life. But it is not to double down in saying that, oh, because my mother did this or because my father did that, now that's just a justification for why I've done this. Like, no. At a certain point, you need to take accountability and take responsibility for the choices that you make. And I think something for me, I've learned that from both my parents, from very different ends of a spectrum. And I think for me being an only child as well of my mom and pretty much growing up as an only child, I've never had that soft cushion to land. Like when I have made mistakes, it's like, no, if I make a mistake, I have to sit with this. I don't have an older sibling, or at least how I've grown up. I didn't have like an older sibling or younger sibling to learn from. So everything has always just been, okay, if I make this choice, I'm the one that has to, sit in it. I don't have, that example to follow or to say, oh, big bro, big sis did this. I don't think I want to do that. Or, yeah, I want to follow in their footsteps or, whatever that is. So I've just always known, even from being younger, that, and maybe that's the reason why I've went throughout my life the way I have with school and just the things that I've done is that all things come back, on me. So I got to learn to take responsibility, to take accountability, and just try to approach things with as much compassion as I have, because in truth, yes, would I love to have a closer relationship with my dad, a more emotional kind of connection? Yes, but is that the reality? No. So it's like either I can spend my time being hot-headed, mad about it, whatever, or I can just, like you say, learn to know that your parents give the capacity for what they have. And it's up to you to decide about what to do with that.
Yeah, and I know one of the lessons that I've learned this past year is like how you introduce your your comments about stepping away and allowing your parent to be them. Because this past year, I learned that my dad kind of have a little bit of homophobia in him. And that wasn't something that I saw
Mm,
growing up because I always felt loved and supported by my dad. But in learning this, it helped me remove him from the
mm,
image that I projected of him and start to see
yeah.
him as the person that he is. And even
Mm,
connecting a lot of the things that I've already known about him. Like one of the things, this is way before this conversation came up, and before anybody asked, I still see my dad. I love that man. Me and my brother we're gonna have a conversation about this, like probably on the Hulu podcast, but that's different. Anyways, but um I learned also within this past year, no, this was within the last 2 years, that my dad's father, my grandfather, was abusive, right? I knew he was abusive towards my grandmother, but I did not know that he abused his kids as well. And learning that context gave me a whole new perspective of my father as well as his siblings. I started to understand a lot why, oh, my aunt acts this way because she was a victim of abuse as well. My uncle
mm,
acts that way because he was a victim of abuse. And then looking at my dad is like, I'm surprised you don't act like your siblings, right?
mm,
And trying to figure out why is it that he's a little bit different and all those other things, just seeing the world from his perspective, right?
mm,
How is it that you became more of the kinder version of your siblings versus being one who will be more of a womanizer? And, or
mm,
what lesson brought you to the point where you chose to stop womanizing, which I do know that answer, but we're not getting into that. But
mm,
So, like, all of these things really helped me start to really see my dad for him rather than seeing my father for this image, this made up story that I had for my from childhood. Like, oh, he's always going to be there. He's not going to do anything that's going to disappoint me and stuff like that. And that is
Mhm.
putting him outside of a reality and setting an expectation that he's definitely going to fail, right?
Yeah.
Um, so even for those who maybe listen to this, it's helpful to start to have those conversations with your parent and your grandparents if they're still in your life to really get some perspective on what their upbringing was like. Like even to this day, I had well before well, no. In general, I have so much context on my grandmother's life and what she's gone
Mhm.
through that when anybody brings up any issues about whatever she experienced, I already humanized her because I had that much knowledge about what
Mhm.
my grandmother's life was like, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, oh no, she was the worst person. No, she had a lot of trauma.
Mhm.
So if we're
Yeah.
going to have comments about how she felt anybody, let's talk about that trauma that led her to it first,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly.
So yeah, having those kinds of conversations, detaching yourself from that position of child and approaching your parent as adult, it does make a lot of a difference, especially if you are looking to grow that relationship and figure out what um, what it means to be stepping in that space too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's so important. And, just to kind of close this topic out, I would love to just bring up one last point that I love from Mike Manning and Brendan Claybon's interview is that when a soap opera like Beyond the Gates premiered, one of the things that Brandon, who plays Martin, was saying was that he loved the fact that they already started the story with the beautiful aspect of course, of Martin being out. He's this politician. And even the fact that they make comments in the first episode, they say, Martin, you have such a beautiful family and this, and that. And we didn't see Smitty, for like the first like couple episodes until he was like introduced. And then we got to see like the kids, Samantha and Tyrell and, stuff like that. And I love when they were introduced, like it wasn't made a thing, in air quotes. It wasn't made a thing that this was like a gay couple. They're just parents, and yeah, they are a beautiful family. So one of the things that I love about what Brandon and Mike brought up is that when it comes to LGBTQ representation, um, it's really important to continue to not necessarily just push the envelope, but to also normalize different kinds of family, and that's something that they hope to do. They hope to raise questions to say like, oh, if you watched Martin, in those first couple episodes, and you're thinking that, oh, we're going to get to see his beautiful family, but then when you find out his beautiful family consists of him and his husband and their two adoptive children, if you think in your head, oh, I thought we were getting introduced to like your wife, or like we're getting introduced to like what you would consider normal family structure. They were saying they hope that it makes audience interrogate and investigate, like, so because you found out that the family was different, does that mean you don't like them anymore? So, and it's not to say like audience feel that way, but they hope that that's what those kind of questions raise if people are feeling like that. To have something that is not necessarily, I wouldn't say normalized because that's not the right word, but to have something in media that you may not typically see, especially in the daytime soap opera genre. It is to say that, yeah, Martin's dad, played by Clifton Davis, Vernon is a civil grandfather. He's a civil rights activist, you know, and things like that. So you have all sorts of various kinds of traditions of masculinity that precede the telling of this family. So the fact that it's not made a thing, that Martin's family loves him, they love Smitty, they love the fam, like it's family. So I just really love the fact that they brought that up, and I hope that they continue with the storytelling that they're doing about their daughter wanting to get into modeling, Tyrell dealing with the whole cyberbullying aspect, that we continue to see these stories and see that LGBTQ couples, they go through the same things with their children and with their families, just like any heterosexual couple. And so I think that my hope for representation is that we continue to have stories that are just told as authentically as they can. It's not to uh shame or confuse. It's not to be like performative. Like, let's just hope we continue to be resilient in telling various kinds of stories when it comes to like our LGBTQ representation, and when it comes to like showing LGBTQ people as parents, because we are parents. So I would just like to, just know your thoughts about what is something maybe you hope for when it comes to more media portrayals of LGBTQ parents on TV or in film.
I was expecting this conversation to go something completely different, but what would I like? Well, let's see. One, like, even though I sent you the other day,
Mhm.
Martin is the one that has frustrated me the most within that couple. And
Okay.
it's not even because of their relational dynamics. It's
No,
mostly
yeah, it's
because
Martin and it's Martin and Jim, which I
Martin.
understand. I understand.
To make it clear for the people. And it's like with that, and I do like it because it does show the struggles that a person, like the real normal struggles, and I'm hoping to see exactly what makes Martin such a tight knit person,
Hmm.
what it is that makes him so resistant to any kind of change. Like even when it comes to, because I just recently saw the episode, catching up with it. The episode when with their daughter wanting to be a model and whatnot, and him
Hmm.
having that conversation, I was thinking that he was going to go towards the route of saying,
Hmm. Yeah.
yes, I'm okay with it. These are the terms. This is what things are going to look like, because she's thought about that, right?
Right.
She's willing to do the work that's necessary to pursue a certain goal that she wants for herself,
Hmm.
but to see him not go along
Yeah.
with it, I'm like,
Yeah.
"Hmm." So like I enjoy seeing things like that because that is something that is normal, right? That is
Hmm. Yeah.
something that any parent will have those hesitancies about.
Hmm.
So I do hope that they just continue to not make gayness issue, make that a struggle for people. It's just people living their regular lives and really starting to understand things. And I know we talked about this a little bit in our episode related to Beyond the Gates. If y'all haven't listened to it, go right back to it. It's literally the entire episode's about the first episodes that came out that week. But in there, we talked about, and also in the interview, and what you mentioned as well, of how they did not have like a coming out or anything. It was just a
Hmm.
normal, hey, this is beautiful family, can't wait to see, blah, 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 all these great things. And boom, gay, cool, whatever. It was never really an issue.
Hmm.
I do want to see a lot more media that focuses on anything outside of the coming out story,
Exactly.
right? Anything outside of the struggle. And I know this is a conversation that a lot of Black people in general are having about Black stories,
Hmm.
going beyond the Black struggle story and just looking at Black narratives. Similar to like Beyond the Gates, where Blackness is not necessarily the motivator behind it, but it's a
Yeah.
framework of understanding a lived experience.
Exactly.
There needs to be a lot more of that. Like even when it comes to, because again, I'm catching up on things. Bill kicking out Mike,
Hmm. Right.
that dynamic, it has two different messages. It's not just
Hmm.
a business partner dissolving their relationship. It
Right.
is like on a racial dynamic, it is uh, we can extend the conversation to how oftentimes in corporate environments or in the workplace,
Hmm.
um, the actions of most often in diverse groups, the responsibility of a white counterpart may
Yeah.
fall on the shoulders of the person of color for them to either fix, clean up, or defend,
Hmm.
while the other person with whatever privileges that they have is advocating that everything goes as normal. Um,
Hmm.
but that's cannot always be possible because you are the cause of the problems that we're facing as a firm. You are a part of the problem that we're having to deal with. You're the reason why we have this lawsuit to begin with,
Exactly. Exactly.
right? Your privilege cannot protect you here, right? Um,
Hmm.
and it's a conversation of now this person, male of color, has to be the person to do all the work.
Hmm.
He has to be the person that fires him. He had to be the person to bring it up to the board about this is the issue. We need to go ahead and chop that out, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm so glad that you brought that up because even with the interview with Mike and Brandon, they talked about obviously the story that's going on right now, not just with Martin and his dad, and that's a whole main story that just got blown up, but where the story with him personally it's headed. I'm very interested to see because, like you say, it's to say that queerness is a factor, but it doesn't have to be the main motivator. And like for somebody like a character like Martin, I always feel like with characters in general, I think multiple things can be true about a character. Like, do I wish for certain characters' downfalls? Absolutely. Does that mean that I can still like them? Absolutely. Do I feel like, oh yeah, I can like you, but you definitely like deserve what has come into you? Of course I can. So I can feel a lot of things about somebody at once. And Martin is one of those characters where, yeah, Martin has a lot of scenes and a lot of lines where it's like you want to take and slap the shit out of him for the way he talks. However, I do understand what drives Martin as a character. He is somebody who has mirrored his life almost like his grandfather, being in the public eye. And now that he's a congressman, it is, and that like they even brought up in the interview, Mike Manning, who's played Smitty, his husband, was bringing up. It's like they have to always be careful about the things that they do because any wrong move, wrong argument, if they get into a public spectacle or anything like that, it ends up in the news headlines.
Mhm.
So Martin, in this resistance that he's had towards Samantha modeling, how he's going about, almost not letting Tyrell take control of his cyberbullying aspect of everything. At the core of it, I think obviously I can understand as a parent, all you want to do is protect your child and not getting that, okay, Martin, you need to back off a little bit, let your children deal with that's how you raise them to be, good adults. But when you think about the makeup of Martin, Martin is all about control. So if he's in a situation where he feels like he is totally out of control, you're gonna get those worst things of him. And hopefully as a character aspect, it's something that he learns and grows throughout time. But we know it's a soap opera, it's a drama. You have to extend that out. But it is something that, when you're talking about characters like Martin and characters like Bill and things like that, people where it's like, because I, for one, when I'm watching TV and film, I love a good villain. I think Bill is hilarious.
This
Bill is hilarious.
it still has me.
So
Say what?
I love a good villain. I love a good villain. I love a good anti-hero when they're written as a anti-hero or as a villain. Like, I don't like for me, I have a personal problem when you try to make the villain or the anti-hero like the moral compass of a lot of characters like they do with other soaps they've done with other movies and stuff. And it's like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? Like you exist in a space for a reason and you need to operate in that space. And there's multi dimensions about what you can do in a certain space, but don't try to conflate or don't try to gaslight audience into thinking like I didn't just see what I saw, like doing things like that. Let's not do that. But yeah, I do, I hope that we can continue to tell very nuanced stories, stories that, yes, always we can always have that layer of queerness that is there because it's innately a part of a lot of people's identity, but we don't necessarily have to have that to be the driving force. So a story like Martin and Smitty dealing with Tyrell's bullying or dealing with Samantha, it can be on the surface about Martin's control or about Smitty's concern about how they look in the public or anything like that. And then it can be layered that, as two dads, like this is difficult for us to navigate, you know. So, just again having those layers and those nuances. So
Yeah, and when you mentioned control, and I don't know if this was something that's purposeful, but I started to think about the symbolism behind, Martin being and being a politician, then Smitty being a journalist, and then,
mm,
how controlling the narrative
yeah.
works out there. And I,
Hmm.
I don't know if they did that on purpose because, him, Smitty being someone where the narrative is the story, right?
Hmm. Right. Hmm.
That it's all about that.
Yeah.
And this person who wants to control that regardless, him preventing him as much as he can from going back to work and all that. And even the importance of what that means when it comes to his children, right?
Hmm.
Because I
Right.
need to know what's going to be coming out, what's going to possibly blow up, so I can either go ahead of it if needed,
Yep.
or just pay for it not to even come out. Mm,
Yep. Yep.
that stood out. Now I'm about to say something completely off the wall in order to
Mhm.
transition into this topic that I'm going to
Yeah.
hop into. But do you believe Smitty and Martin might be participating in race play? Let me stop. I'm not asking a serious
Mm.
question. I'm really not. I just
Well,
want to
okay, no,
transition.
no, but it's an interesting question. It would be interesting, like if for some reason, like, because they made a comment on their interview to say, like, because of course, we have another character, Martin's niece, Chelsea, is she's seeing a couple, you know, an actual couple on the show, and she had a thing about like talking about threesomes and things like that. And I like the fact that they had in the dialogue they wanted to course correct and say she wasn't bringing up threesomes to say like this thing about like, oh, because Martin and Smitty are queer men that they just have an open marriage. Like, I like the fact that they didn't do that in the dialogue, but like I love how Martin brought it up as a character, but Brandon also brought it up in the interview to say like, no, Martin and Smitty are monogamous to to each other. Now, if that changes somewhere down the line, or what have you, go ahead. Now, me personally, as somebody who is more poly inclined and centered in my life, um, of course, I always root for poly representation. However, I believe that because of the fact we don't get to see monogamy as much with queer couples, I'm like, this is one of those things where I'm gonna abdicate my seat, my seat a little bit. And it's like, can I just have some good, just great love, joy, a little bit of drama with my monogamous people, with my monogamous LGBTQ people? Like, we need that to be shown in the media. So this ain't even about, poly representation or any other type of relationship structure representation. We can get to that, and there's a lot of nuance that comes with that. But it's like we need to have settle the first we need to settle the first thing first. But it is a very interesting aspect of race play, though, that you bring up.
Now that we're talking about, well, since we're in the conversation about race play and we were bringing up characters from that show,
Mm,
Catherine, that's the real estate agent, right? I always forget her name.
okay.
Is that her name?
Ooh.
The white real estate agent?
Oh, that Vanessa.
Vanessa. Vanessa.
Hmm.
See it. I see it. I can see a little bit of race play between her and that.
Oh
That,
yeah, her and Doug.
that.
Hey, I mean, her and Doug. I mean, that love scene that they had was spicy. I'm like, all right.
Oh, now I definitely need to catch up. Anyways,
Oh no,
so
now you just pulled something. I'm catch up.
it's okay. It's okay. It's okay. I don't believe in spoilers anyways. Look, I already know how the entire film of Sinners plays out, and I still haven't seen it. And I'm still going to go see it and be surprised.
Y'all
Uh,
get him to the theater.
See, the reason I haven't gone is because my cousin says she's going to pay for my ticket and everything, and she be working a lot, and I be working a lot, and just getting these schedules to align. Oh my God. I'm going to end up paying for it on YouTube before I actually go to the movie theater. But anyways, so the reason why I bring up race play, this is kind of going back into last week conversation with that guy, Shannon Sharp. I'm trying not to cuss on this podcast. Um, um, Where to start? I mean, I'm going to try to keep this short so that we're not on the show for way, way too long. But a part of the conversation related to Shannon Sharp with, his abuse and, well, sexual abuse and all that, the allegations is that there were text messages, audio, and all this other stuff coming out. And it brought up the conversation about race play. And then I've seen on other social media channels, well, mostly on YouTube, the occasional TikTok where people are talking about race play, and some people adding to the conversation about, oh, it stems from slavery because you get to have, I'm going to cuss, you get to have the opportunity of fucking master's wife and all that. It's all about the power, the black man, blah 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 blah.
Mm,
I felt the urge to go ahead and demystify certain things for people
mhm,
about how race play dynamics work, as well as when we go back into that time frame where black people were enslaved, how that is not consent as well. Because I need for people to understand, even when it comes to that conversation of black men who go after white women in order to internally fulfill this desire that they are sticking it to the man, sticking it to the white man by having his woman or whatever.
mm,
You have to recognize where the power is within the room, right?
mm,
Since we're going to be talking about race play and everything. When we go back into enslavement, the person who's enslaved does not have the power, right? Yes, this person may be having sex with Massa's wife, but if he's caught with Massa's wife, what do you think happens to him?
mm,
He's gone. He's dead. He's deceased now. Or certain, a little bit more worse, as uh, by the means of torturing this individual. That is something that happens there. When we go beyond enslavement and we're talking about, black men going after white women, Emmett Till is the prime example of how that conversation goes, right? And not to minimize what Emmett Till went through, of the lies that was shared about his actions.
mm,
But oftentimes, when there were situations where there was consensual sex between a black man and white woman, in order to protect themselves, the white woman would say that it was sexual abuse, right? There was no power in the room. Okay? Do y'all see the trend where
mm,
this is going? When it comes to these race play dynamics, you have to recognize that you yourself, especially if you are a person of African descent, you are not the person that has that full control. Now, this is not to say that there are not mutual because again, it's not the shame race play. It's not my cup of tea, and I don't see myself ever sipping it. But for those who are into that, you do your own things. Are there those people who may participate in that because they hate themselves? Most definitely. But are there people who participate in this because of the kink and they still love themselves? Absolutely.
mm,
But we have to think about the real life dynamics that exist, especially for those people who are not in the kink community.
mm,
So if you have that mindset that, oh, I'm doing this because I'm getting back at the man, you don't have the power in the room.
right. Yeah.
So wanted to get your, feels on that conversation.
Yeah, it's so interesting because like whenever I think about race play, I always go back to a workshop I actually attended for Black people in the BDSM community in kink, and one of the great like prominent Black feminist scholars, activists, she's a kink educator. Her name is Feminista Jones, And I loved how she talked about, she's written, articles that center on the nature of the interplay between like personal agency, historical trauma, which includes
Mhm.
race play and things like that. And I love how she acknowledges that race play is one of the most like contentious aspects of BDSM within the BDSM community, and especially for obviously for Black individuals and especially for Black women. um there's a lot of things that are entwined with that choice to engage in race play, and so a lot of her writings discuss how roles and scenarios in race play can evoke painful histories, right? It can make the practice of BDSM emotionally charged and potentially re-traumatizing. So I think that where how I, see her work, and it mimics obviously a little bit of where I stand, is that uh I'm all about the nature of sexual expression, sexual freedom. However, I think that it comes at a harm. If it comes at a harm to you, then
Mm.
it's like, okay, what are we doing here? And here's the thing. I know because I've read arguments, because I've really wanted to understand and read arguments about why a person of color would engage in race play. And I truly understand from a certain perspective that, you know wanting to make a conscious effort and assertion to regain a sexual freedom inherently, I think, almost is contradictory. Is almost contradictory in a sense, because you're not engaging in a type of freedom when this is marked by when it's marked by historical trauma. No matter, I think, how you try to look at it. So in essence, I think that even with consent, race play often, I think, reproduces those exact hierarchies and dehumanization that systemic racism enforces in everyday life, right? We
Mhm.
can it's kind of like the way I think about it is that it reinforces like that idea of white supremacy under the guise of foreplay. you know Especially when we involve a lot of things about race play, right, where you may be involved in using slurs, you may be involved in like what you would consider like a master's whip, or something like that. And again, you're under the guise of you're trying to reclaim, you know reclaim, a kind of freedom, or something like that. But again, it's a very, very slippery slope, and especially when you have interracial race play, right?
Mhm.
So the racial power imbalance is always going to be innately, not, I wouldn't even say equal, but it's not even on the same wavelength. And so again, I understand it. Some people of color use kink, with race play to reclaim agency over racial trauma. However, I think without trauma informed framing and safeguards, what you do is you reenact that traumatization rather than heal it.
Mhm.
So, and of course, if you are with a white partner, of course, that risk is even greater, you know. And then, of course, I have a lot of things when it comes to like race play can, like, for me, even just veer into aspects that we talk about all the time, like fetishization,
Mhm.
where it's like my racial identity now becomes the focus of desire, because you just want to be with the BBC, or you just want somebody of this color skin, or whatever. So it makes me, for me, it would make me feel like an object,
Mhm.
rather than engaging with the true dynamics, the true power dynamics that are supposed to be involved with any type of kink or any type of play. So, yeah, I've always just thought that the nature of race play is just a very slippery slope. It's something that I personally don't get from a person of color, how we engage with it. However, I do try to be sympathetic and understanding of why somebody somebody would. I'm not here to pass judgment. It just, as they say, everything ain't your cup of tea, and that's
Mhm.
definitely not mine. And it's definitely not mine.
And brought me back to our conversation about black fetishization, which y'all should go back and listen to on the other podcasts and whatnot. But when you said BBC, I did not ever think about the connection of that phrasing to
Mhm,
race play. Because if you are engaging with somebody for the purposes of sex and they just throw that in, F me with your BBC and all that, or with that big black cock. Ugh. If they happen to say that,
I choke when I say
it,
like
it just
it's like a
it just feels
right
so
there.
weird. I don't like that word. Um, but whenever that happens, and it's become so normalized, especially in porn and everything, that I didn't even think of that as potentially being race play, or even how that can be
Mm,
non-consensual race play,
mm,
because now we're really bringing race into the sexual dynamic, because rather than f me with your cock or your hard cock, it is f me with your big black. Right now, we're
mhm,
bringing race into the room.
mhm,
Um, and now it's making me see that a lot more people are into race play than I actually thought, because of that concept, or unknowingly participating in race play,
mhm.
because of that being so normalized, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's the thing. It's a cell because and see that's the thing why I think I disassociate with race play anyway because we carry cellular memory. So this is not just I think it would not to say it would be right, but I think that if we lived in a utopia of a society where we didn't have to deal with race every day,
Mm-hmm.
where it's like, okay, if I could actually really walk out into the world where my skin color was not an issue, and we just lived in rainbows and everything like that, and truly in a kind of way like you didn't see color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I could maybe even slightest margin entertain, oh, okay, if I wanted to involve myself in race play, like, okay, yeah, let me go into this role where it's like, okay, now I'm the master, or do I want to be in the opposite role where I'm condemning myself to, maybe be in shackles or be in chains or something? So again, I think it's like the political awareness of it as well. It's
Mm-hmm.
asking the question, what does it mean to eroticize violence tied to oppression? And can we ever fully consent to reenacting historical trauma in a society that still enacts it every day?
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's a word.
That's like the political aspect of those questions.
Like the thing that really boggles me when it comes to race play is, why is it that we always go back to that setting? Why is it that we're always going back to the
Mhm,
slave master? Because I don't think I will find too much issue, and of course someone else may, of that specific race, but personally, if it happened to be a scene of someone, in a geisha outfit,
mhm,
and they do race play in that situation, and it's
mm,
not necessarily like them being well, I don't think they really had too much geisha culture. Well, no, it's still going on. Anyways, if they happen, like, taken away, like, no Vietnam War or no
mhm,
war going on, if we just happen to be, oh, you're at the spa and you're the geisha,
mhm,
is that more of a appropriate version of race play than having to go back to the trauma of things? Or even you being a African prince, and I am visiting your culture and trying to
mhm,
engage in that, and how that starts up a sexual fantasy or a sexual interaction. Like, how
mhm.
we can do these things.
Right.
Like, this can exist, but is not the norm, which is very interesting to me, that rather than thinking about the cultural costuming that we can
Mhm,
utilize in order to enact a race play scene, we automatically go to the slave master,
mhm,
right? And that in itself makes me feel as though
the practice of race play as it is now is just kind of another form of normalizing oppression in a way.
Mhm. Yeah, and like I said, I think it's just important to remember that, I think we have to acknowledge the range of experiences. And like we were talking about
Mm,
earlier in our earlier topic, I'm always somebody that I believe in plural truths. I think multiple things can be true. And so race
mhm,
play may be empowering for some, it's deeply wounding for others, and
mhm,
for many, it's entirely off limits. But I think that, if you're going to, I always say that if you're going to engage in something, investigate why you're doing it. So very much I always encourage curiosity, I think, over judgment by just really asking questions in this particular scenario. What makes race play or this topic difficult to talk about, for you and your
mhm,
personal standpoint? What are the power dynamics? Because really that's what BDSM and kink is about. It's about power dynamics. What are the power dynamics we inherit even in our fantasies? So is it safe for you to engage in race play with with a partner or somebody who actually has an outwardly demeanor of dehumanizing other human beings?
mhm.
Like let's have that conversation. So again, ain't my forte, ain't my thing, but I just say if you're going to engage in something, investigate and be curious about why you're doing it before you actually do
Right.
it, you know.
So the other thing that I wanted to bring up today, I'm going to push back till next week. The attack on expertism and being anti-intellectual. So y'all look forward to that conversation next
Mhm.
week. And this is just to keep things from being like an hour and a half. But I want to jump into the rollout
Yeah,
of this beautiful podcast,
yeah,
Reliving Single. I saw the pilot.
yeah,
I've also seen the first episode, and I'm ready to discuss. And I'm looking forward to what they're bringing out
yeah.
this week on Wednesday. It is coming out on Wednesday, people. So if you listen to this on Tuesday, you can watch on YouTube or wherever else they're releasing it on
Mhm.
Wednesday. Okay. I even saw the interview on the Breakfast Club. I've just been too far into this already, and I love it
Mhm.
for
I
all
have
of
as
us.
well.
So for those who do not know what reliving single is, so have you heard of living single? Have you heard of Friends? Okay, so if you heard of Friends, you should know that Living Single is the show that they base Friends off of because we're always going to be putting respect on these black women's names, okay? And these black men who are also in the show. Black people are getting their respects today and always. So Living Single follows a group of friends as they grow and age and really move into their careers,
Mhm.
right? They're I think the youngest of them would have been 23 or something of that nature. I forget. They are young adults moving into adulthood, essentially, really learning the ropes, learning how they are dating, learning how to um, show well, not even show love, but extend care to one another, even when there's conflict, how to be a family while also working with family. It's so many multitude of dynamics that comes from this show. And if you have not seen it,
Yeah.
it's on so many streaming platforms. So definitely look it up, catch up so you can be a part of the conversation because they are only have one episode out, but get into it. Now,
Mhm.
reliving single, which is the members of the cast, um specifically Erica Alexander and Kim Cole. Is her last
Mhm.
name Cole?
Goals. Mhm.
Coast, yeah. They are the host of the podcast. They're talking, doing deep dives in their experiences on the show. So giving us some background and what brought them there, what started the show, what these episodes represented, things that we didn't know that was going on in the backgrounds, all of this. So it's a recap, it's a rewatch podcast or something like
It's a
that.
rewatch. Mhm.
Yeah, so they are rewatching the shows themselves and giving us their major takes. So, welcome to the world of reliving single, and I'm happy to have that with us. So,
Yeah.
just even start off, Tyrell, how are you feeling about this? What are your thoughts? Let's go ahead and dive
Oh
into
my
it.
goodness. Yes, speaking of, obviously as we started the segment talking about mothers, I spent today with my mother, obviously for Mother's Day. We both watched it together. Living Single was one of our, like sitcoms, intergenerational, sitcoms, like growing up, like, and as me and my mom were talking about, it's like characters really stop becoming characters when they feel like your family.
Mm,
So it's like if I was to see like any of these actors like on the street, I more than likely would not call them by their actual name. I would be like Max, Ray J, you know, but that's just goes to
exactly.
show about how much you can be beloved and how much you can create a platform that you mean to people. I was actually, just a little side note, I was watching an interview that Sarah Michelle Gellar and Allison Hannigan, who were the stars of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Buffy and Willow, 1990s classic show, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. We both, me and Vernon, that's both of our one of our top shows.
Mhm,
um and one of the things that Sarah Michelle Gellar said really quickly was that she never really was thinking at the time about the impact that Buffy would have so many generations later. It's like, it's almost 30 years and people are still, talking about Buffy, which is a great thing. And to move this back to, living single, it's like I think when you're in that space, when you're, a young professional, you're trying to what you do is you
mhm.
show up at your job because you're trying to get paid. You know,
Amen.
that's just like any other person. And you never really have in your hindsight at the time of thinking about what an impact like your show will make. And even though Kim brought up, she was like, yeah, this was going to be something special. I just loved all of the gems that they dropped for how the show came to be and stuff like that. And I was like taking little notes. And one of the notes that I wanted to bring up, I loved how Erika Alexander, who plays Max, I love how they brought up in the pre-show about even before they taped. I always knew that there was the story about um they thought that the way that Max was written was like too strong. Like she was just too much to like live with the characters of Khadijah, Sinclair, and Regine. So to kind of like alter that for the network, they gave her own place. The reason why I bring that up is because what Erika talked about, even from the pre-show, was that what it's like to have people fight for you when you're not in the room. And I thought that that was so, so powerful. She brings up this aspect of, at some point, while the show was being made and things like that, of course, certain things they found to be not necessarily problematic, but certain things that didn't fit the network because Fox was a new network at the time in the
Mhm.
early 90s. So they were like this new network now competing with ABC, NBC, and CBS. And so, as they were trying to create something fresh and new, I love the fact that Erika brought up about, her manager and, her team was like always stood behind her when she wasn't even in rooms. And to like hear stories about that now, because as we know, so many stories that come out about kids or young adults who get exploited and taken advantage of, or
Mm,
they don't get what they deserved and everything like that. It's like it was so refreshing to hear about good people that do exist. And even stemming obviously from in the 90s when this was said to be produced, like, no, when you have people in your corner that fight for you, that's always a testament. Do people fight for you when you're not in the room?
mm.
And I love that. I love that gem that she dropped there.
Yeah, and even to go a little bit further, because it's even when it came to just the start of everything, like when Kim Cole mentioned
Hmm.
how the show almost didn't happen because
Yeah.
of the script that I think the showrunner
Yeah,
Yvette, I think
Yvette.
it's
Hmm.
the way that it was written, they weren't feeling it, and she mentioned how she and Queen Latifah both were like, we're going to extend this further. Like they had the choice of letting things go
Hmm.
and going back onto the market and shopping around for their next role or whatever, but they chose
Yeah.
to let me push that further back because I believe in this, right?
Hmm.
And it just goes to show the power of just believing in the thing that you want to do for yourself, as
Yeah.
well as like you mentioned, whenever you see the power of another person,
Hmm.
making sure you touch base on that. Because even I don't know if it was the first episode or the pre-show, but when Erica Alexander was talking about how she got onto the Cosby Show, that was on the pre-show,
Hmm.
how she got on the Cosby Show, she mentioned that well. The rumor is that Bill Cosby's wife knew of
Hmm.
her work and was just like, you need to put her on, right? And just how and it's so beautiful how so much of that happened back in the day where someone sees your worth and they reach out to the person that they know to make sure that you have a seat at the table, right?
Hmm.
To make sure that you are being seen by the right people because she even mentioned she auditioned multiple times for some role and that one I need you to meet this girl, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Got to them making Cousin Pam a character in the show, a character that did not exist and now is a whole being now.
Yeah. And speaking of, just a side note, shout out to like a lot of creators and producers' wives that are out here,
Mm,
because I've been hearing more and more stories about it be the wives that actually be discovering some of these, some of the talents. Real quick story. I watched the interview with with obviously beloved actress Vivica A. Fox. And Vivica talked about she got the role of Independence in Independence Day because the writer, or I think like the creator for the movie, his wife is the one that saw her on the soap opera back in the day and said there is this
wow.
beautiful girl Vivica, like her name is Vivica, like, ooh, like I'd love to, like, you should call her, like, call her. So I love like hearing a story like that, like, oh, it was like the wife, is the one
Hmm.
that made the connection, so yeah.
Right. I'd say another thing that really stood out to me,
Mhm.
and I'm so happy that it happened on screen and they handled that conversation so well. And it's all about being seen and being heard in the
Mhm.
conversation too. But when Erica brought up, and just so everybody knows, I typically do not know people's names, like people who are celebrities. So for me to know their names means a lot. But when Erica mentioned, brought up the concept of colorism, right?
Yes,
And
very powerful concept.
that caused some conflict because Kim, and I think I don't want to say she misheard her or anything, but it seemed more so because she was one of the people and creators of the show, right?
Right.
So it could have easily been seen as a personal critique of her.
Mhm.
So I will understand why she would have seen that as being such. But they had a conversation about how colorism was in the room on set and
Mhm.
how that may have played a role in the reception of Max as a character, as well as the way that she and TC may have been treated on
Mhm.
set, right? And just to see how they were able to have that conversation, discuss each other's viewpoint, and also gain clarity on, no, I'm talking about this,
Mhm.
was a
Yeah.
beautiful thing because I don't. We don't see healthy conflict a lot,
Yeah.
which also, did you see the Breakfast Club interview or not? Or not?
I did. I caught some clips of it.
And in that they because they have a conversation with Jess Hilarious and y'all, I do not watch Breakfast Club. Again, not my cup of tea, but they were on there. Um, but they were actually talking about um some like it was a TC, but I'm going to come back into that in a second. But they were talking about, there was a moment of conflict where, where essentially the topic at hand was, if we had social media back in the day, would they have gone live to advocate for TC and whatnot? And of
Mhm.
course, well, Erica was like, yeah, yeah, I'll do that, right? And it was hilarious to me because there was like, yeah, I would do it. Is it the best approach? Absolutely not, because they were like, the preferred route would be to have a conversation in private before doing that, which was funny to see them kind of critiquing Jess Hilarious at the same time, because she said that's what I did.
Mhm.
But also show that, yeah, these conflicts happen. We can still be family at the end of the day. We can still talk about our disagreements. We can still have everybody feel heard in the room and feel seen, and still move on to the other side. That is how we do business. That's how we move in this industry. That's how we make this show work. So it was just beautiful just to
Yeah.
see that.
Yeah. And I, like you say, I love the fact that like Kim and Erica, like you could see where they had that little moment of tension. And it wasn't
Hmm.
tension like, oh my God, this is about to be a full blown argument, but it's just about perspectives. Because of course,
Hmm.
Erica, speaking from the embodiment of a darker skinned woman, she has that perspective where she's speaking in general. Not to say
Hmm.
like this was her treatment, like on the show, quite the opposite, even, but it was just the nature of her speaking in general, in the fact that, yeah, colorism does, play a part in the nature of how you are seen, of course, as desirable, the things that you are allowed to do and get away with on screen, and things like
Hmm.
that. And, coming from Kim's perspective, like you say, I think at the first part, like she may have misheard, because Erica wasn't speaking about like her treatment like on their set.
Hmm.
But I sympathize with what Kim was saying as well, because for her, in her growing up, like she says, her mother was, of a
Hmm.
darker brown skin. And like she says, coming at her as a lighter skin, woman, she always desired to kind of like be darker like her mother. So it's kind of like when you grow up in an environment where like color, it, not to say it's not seen, but it's not tokenized in the way that America
Hmm.
sees, you know skin color. It's like, oh yeah, Kim having that retrospect is like, oh no, like I would never, like want to have that to, like happen, or where that's reinforced. And little knowledge, I love knowing the fact that the lighting director won some Emmys based on
Right.
how they were shooting Max and Kyle. I'm like, yes, for the lighting Emmys.
Okay.
I'm
Let it be
like, you
seen.
better drop that knowledge, yes.
We got this because that black skin was beautiful,
Yeah.
okay?
But yeah,
Oh,
but
women's
what I think
skin.
in general is that I think the preface of that small segment of the conversation was that it's to remind people that colorism is something that harms everyone, even
Hmm.
those who benefit from it structurally. The desire to be seen as more black or less black is born from obviously that white supremacist ideal, that fragmentation of black identity. And it's something that I'm
Hmm.
hoping that we continue to interrogate, investigate, and we continue to heal from, because it doesn't serve us. It doesn't
Right.
serve us to have this divide about, oh, I'm light skinned, so I don't, I could never understand this. You're darker skin, so you could never understand this. But it is to say that yes, you are of darker skin, I am of lighter skin, and yes, we both have our experiences and things like that. And we should tell those stories because they are important. You as a darker skinned man, you are going to be treated differently. Me as a light skinned man, I may have preferential treatment when it comes to certain circles. And so it's important for us to know those things, know that they're
Hmm.
not our fault, and know that all of our black is beautiful.
Yes.
All of our black is beautiful.
Yes.
Also, something that was, and this was one of my last of 2 points I wanted to bring up, something that I love that was brought up. Um, Now, this was where I didn't necessarily disagree with what Erica was saying, but I kind of had a little bit of different view when they got into the part of the conversation about was Living Single considered a black show or a show with a
Mm.
black cast?
Oh, that was a good conversation.
Yeah, I tended to lean more towards Kim's point of view
Okay.
because for me, the differentiation between a black show versus a show with a black cast was not just for the actors, but it was about the creation of the show. I've always considered Living Single to be a black show because we had not just a black cast, but you rarely ever saw white people on Living Single. You would see them sometimes, like obviously if somebody was coming in to flavor, or like obviously like when Kyle had to deal with, the aspects of like corporate business and things like that. But they were not necessarily you didn't see white people as a supporting cast, or things
Mhm.
like that. Versus how they brought up when you saw shows like the Jeffersons or What's Happening, or Sanford and Son, where yeah, you saw white people all the you saw white people all the time. It may have been centered on black people, but you still had other
Mhm.
colors of people there at the same time. Those would be shows that I would consider. Yeah, I didn't classify them necessarily as black shows. For me to classify something as a black show means that we don't just have majority of the actors that are black, but we have the creation, that the fact that it's done by black writers, it's done from a black led perspective and team.
Mhm.
So for me, that's kind of where I understood where Erica was coming from when she said that when we classify things as a black show or cast that just happens to be black, it does in fact create this I think this quiet erasure where we displace where we when we start to segregate, it creates a death in the business itself, because now people can now claim ownership based on what they
Mhm.
feel is right and wrong, right and wrong, based on how we're represented. But for me, I know for myself, and I would love to know your perspective. The reason why I consider things to be from black shows is because even understanding as a little boy, we know that networks and stuff were obviously owned, by white people, of course, and things like that.
Mhm.
But for me, black shows were also a part of like when things came on BET and UPN and things like that. So I think the more bigger mainstream, as we talk about white mainstream, the network was, the more I would segment into, thinking otherwise. But yeah, I just wanted to know, obviously, like from you, what was your thoughts about the nature of like black show versus show with a black cast?
So, I definitely found myself connecting more with Kim's argument in that conversation as well. Like, and I think the main difference in what they were saying was based on defining what black was supposed to mean. Because like for like, of course, I do still agree with what Erica mentioned,
Oh, of
and
course.
I
Okay.
just so people will be clear, because my takeaway from Erica is that she was talking about more so like the labeling,
Mhm.
like the systemic framing of differentiating between a show worth putting money towards versus something that we will put more money
Mhm.
towards, meaning the ones that's supposed to be popular for everybody, which will be the white-facing shows, and
Right.
then the segregated black entertainment, meaning we're only going to be pushing this out for black people to watch, and we don't see the value of that extending to a broader audience, which Living Single said, hold my tea, of
Mhm.
course. But like, so that understanding I do have in what she was arguing, but I think what's fueling that conversation comes from the um cultural black lens. Like in today's time, the way that we may call something a black show means that it is black centered, that it
Right.
is culturally black, that if I were to look at this at any different stage, I would see my mom, I would see my uncle, I would see my granddad, I would see somebody in my
Mhm.
life that is represented in the telling of the show.
Mhm.
Um, and I believe that is the perspective, but not fully, of where Kim was trying to argue, and that's how I see that terminology of black shows,
Yeah.
right? Like we have so many shows. I don't really consider the Jeffersons or being black center as much because
Right, because they weren't. They
right.
were made with a black cast, but when you think about the external aspects of it, they were just, they were shows with a black cast, with a black cast.
Exactly. Like, um, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, but like, Family Matters. First
Mm,
season of Family Matters was a black show.
mm,
After that, it was a black centered show or a black cast show, right?
mm,
It wasn't necessarily as culturally black as we would want it to be. Was there still aspects of the culture that was still there throughout the show? Yes. But as the show focused more on the hijinks of Steve Urkel, the more it became a show of comedy and buffoonery, I might as well say, of in the guise of blackness, right?
mm,
So it's just identifying those things are differentiating what is culturally black from just something that we're just putting black faces for to make the money with,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So,
And yeah,
mhm,
and I think that what's important to take away from Erica and Kim's perspectives is I think that Erica is urging to see the point that we can reclaim language and logic, right? A show with
mhm,
a black cast when made by black people for everyone isn't less universal. It's cultural.
mhm,
Period. And culture doesn't need to apologize from where it comes from to be valuable, right? So instead of segregating like she was talking about, I think what she was really, saying is that we need to investigate like who owns the narrative, right? Who profits from that visibility? Who gets to
mhm,
tell the story of their own community? So the goal is not to, I think, erase the specificity of blackness, but to refuse its confinement, right? And just a counteract to Kim's point, I think to call a show black from within the community isn't about limiting its reach. It's about,
mhm.
just naming its roots. When we think about A Different World, Girlfriends, Boondocks,
Ooh,
I like
yes.
call those, like we call those black shows because it's not reductive, it's reverent. We say that, yeah, this from like in its inception is from, a black creator. It's rooted in us. It centers black creators, not just the cast. So it
Mhm,
creates that sovereignty, not just representation, you know.
mhm.
So yeah.
And just to give a general idea for somebody who may not understand how that may connect for somebody who may not be black, if you're a fan, if you happen to be queer, or if you're a fan of Steven Universe, right?
Mhm,
That is a queer show, right?
mhm,
Queer creator, queer concepts, and all of that, but they don't do like a lot of queer things. Like it's not like LGBTQ plus blah 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 blah. But in essence, the way that the gems fuse and all that, it's given kind of queer, right?
mhm,
That's a similar framework of how we're having this conversation, just to conceptualize that for some people.
yeah.
Um,
And
mhm,
And just last thing I wanted to bring up about the nature of why I enjoyed the podcast so much. I love the fact that from the first episode we talked about something that has been always stigmatized when it comes to shows, but it's not until you get older that you recognize that no, these characters were not stereotypes.
mhm,
So I love the fact that in the first episode, one of the things that has been brought up in media a lot over the years was Sinclair written as a dumb character. And even growing up, like I never viewed Sinclair as a dumb character. What she did to me, like Ditz is not dumb. It's
mhm,
just like they say, you have like a childlike wonder you know and honestly, I love the conversations that I hear from people now when they go back and watch Living Single, and when they bring up like a character like Sinclair, that yeah, from the perspective of all four women, she may seem to be like like the weaker one, or like whatever, because she's there for like that comedy relief. But I love how people understand and they see herself in them. Like I see
Hmm.
women in comments who say, yeah, I'm actually like, when it came to career, I was actually most like Sinclair. I didn't necessarily have that aspect of being entrepreneurial like Khadijah was, or that fashion for like Regine, or that powerhouse like Max. I was, like a receptionist. Like I did baffled in like accounting and did this and did that before I found my niche, like Sinclair does with acting, and things like that. So I love how they talked about the perception sometimes of like their stereotypical. Like when they talked about Regine, Regine is not promiscuous
Mm-mm.
at all. Like Regina is not somebody who just sleeps with whoever, comes about. Like, girlfriend has a goal. Considering where she comes from, she believes that if she has a man of certain status, that that's going to get her certain things, which is very true in real life. Overton is not a simpleton, as a lot of people try to claim. No, Overton is like your next door kind of round the way guy who has these witty, insightful aspects of life. We can say, I mean, Kyle, from the first time we see him, yeah, Kyle is chauvinistic, don't get us wrong, like he is, but Kyle comes into a professional setting with locks, like they say. He comes into the scene with locks, who's very unapologetically Afrocentric, right? And so as we talk about these characters and we see like the discourse that happens with them online about like, oh, like, is this person just this or this person just that? It's like, no. And I love that Yvette, who is the writer for the show, I love how she has talked about in interviews that she created Khadijah, Sinclair, Regine, and Max based on different aspects of her personality. So she said, yeah, at a certain, I'm very entrepreneurial, like Khadijah is.
Hmm.
I am, at some point they brought up in the podcast, she wanted to be a lawyer at some point. So that's how she crafted the character of Max. She says that, yeah, in some way I do have that diva-ish kind of attitude, like, Regine. And she says, I do have my childlike wonder and mind like that in my spaces like Sinclair. So I love the fact, even when Yvette talks about the creation of the characters, she's like, yeah, they all stem from aspects of my personality.
Yeah,
So,
it's a beautiful show. I'm actually going to be watching episode 2 the night before, so I could just go into the conversation fresh. Um, there was one more. Oh, well, first off, I forgot to mention Regine was actually like one of my people that I looked up to because, like, as I got older,
yes.
and most definitely how I am now when it comes to sexuality, I was like, this old girl just had ownership of her things.
Yeah. And
Like,
Regine, and again, Regine is not a caricature or type. I love like how bougie Regine is, but how real
hmm.
Regine is too. I love the
Listen.
fact Regine just takes off her wig and Regine will have those moments where she reminds you that she may be bougie, but she's still from the hood.
Look, she can scrap.
Because
Um,
I mimic all the time her scene with her dropping on that floor with that gun. like, girl, please, like, I'm from the hood. Like, we don't play that. Like, we
not
don't.
at all.
No.
Um, so my last part that I wanted to bring up for this conversation, this came out on the what's that show called? Breakfast Club. It just don't be in my head. I'm sorry, but the Breakfast Club interview with them, because I didn't know this, but did you know TC Carson was fired?
Yeah, I did. I learned some time back. I think that when they were doing like interviews or something like that back in the day, it came out that yeah, he was fired. So what did they say? Because I got into the like the stories about what I heard about
Mm-hmm.
it. But what did they say?
They didn't say much. Well, first off, for those who don't know, TC Carson, he plays Kyle Barker. So they didn't go as much into it, but they just brought it up. And essentially, because they didn't know that he thought that no one fought for him.
Mm,
And what they ended up saying is like, no, we actually did fight for him. Because a lot of them did not know that he was fired until the day before, like this screening or this interview or this show or something that they were going to, where they were thinking all the cast was going to be there, but the day before that, they were just like, "Oh no, he's not going to be present." And then, but that Kim relayed that side of it.
Mm,
But Erica was like, she went to bat for him, right?
mm,
Like she even mentioned how at one point she wanted to quit the show. But when she wanted to quit the show, they threatened her with a lawsuit if she didn't
mm,
continue. So she said that she felt trapped in terms of what can she do here because she can't threaten to quit because now they have that potential of we will sue you for money or backing out of the contract or whatever. So you can't threaten to quit and all that. So she mentioned how she um wanted
mm.
him to come back, that she did what she could to try to vouch for him to not be fired and all of that, but it was something that was a decision made that was outside of their control. But they all confirmed that um, each individual who was a part of the show
Mm.
wanted him to still be there, that they did whatever
Yeah.
they could, and it hurt them to know that he was feeling this way and not know that side. And they do hope to have him on the show so that they can get a further,
Yeah. Yeah,
recollection of that.
and that will definitely be an interesting conversation because like I've seen some interviews with TC and basically I think from his perspective, I think I saw like an Essence interview from him one time and
Mhm.
various places and basically what I understood from what he was saying was that he was fired before the final season because he was always like the vocal advocate for like the cast and their concerns when it came to the show's treatment by the network. So he often acted as like that spokesperson addressing issues related to character portrayals and disparities in support because he often brings up that when the show kind of first started, people liked Overton and Kyle, but they could see like this. He didn't want this trend to happen where you write men in predominantly like women circles that are made to be like buffoons.
Mhm.
They it's like if you're gonna write men in these spaces, like write them as nuance as well and things like that. But anyway, um, and so he, highlighted how like of course Living Single received like less backing from Warner Brothers in comparison to Friends, despite the fact that both shows were being produced by the same company, and things
Mhm.
like that. So he really believed that his I think he said that his firing was because he was always challenging like the status quo and advocating for more equitable treatment. And so I can see his perspective in him thinking like, okay, if I'm the one that's speaking now, then I'm the one that has to take the brunt of like being fired. But I also think it's like I can understand their perspective in saying like we didn't know, so it's like, or, we did fight. But, I just think that in times like that, people fight in different ways. Some people are more vocal,
Mhm.
than him. And it shows even when, when ratings come out. Cause I mean, hey, let's be honest, the final season did not, do as well, and obviously was canceled after, not just because the network was changing, but because, of course, yeah, Kyle was missing,
Mhm.
as a character. So it really was an ensemble cast. And, having one of them missing, it's like it throws the dynamic off,
Exactly.
so. But yeah,
Like, and
that's
it
the stories that I've always heard from him and from like interviews.
And I think a lesson from that conversation that they had about this situation is it's the beauty of hindsight, but
Mm,
also the hurt that comes along with hindsight as well. Because
mm,
like even when we come to the pre-show, how Erica was telling Kim how girl, you had influence, right? You
mm,
could make things happen.
mm.
But she mentioned, well, at the time, I didn't know I had that, right?
Right, yeah.
Even though I came into these rooms and I made demands, I didn't think that there was influence and power that was going along
Right.
with that. Now
Mm,
that I'm older and I'm reflecting on that time, I can see that.
mm,
And one of the things that came out from Erica when they were talking about the TC situation is that many of them didn't know how they could advocate for Kyle, right? We can go back and say, yes, we could have all came collectively and say we're not going to put on this final season if Kyle, well, if TC is not here,
Mhm.
which would be a powerful statement. But at the same time, you have Erica in the mindset of if I do that, I will get fired and then have a lawsuit and I have to pay them back. And then
Mhm.
you also have just others not knowing that that's a potential for them to do,
Right.
right? So the hindsight is recognized that yeah, I could have done something different to
Mhm.
make that change, but
Mhm.
of course we can't really change the past now.
Right.
So I
Right.
think that was a beautiful perspective that they shared.
Absolutely. But yeah, I'm looking forward to continuing with the rewatch and everything. Cause I mean, like I watch Living Single like every morning anyway. Like when it comes to TV1, I'm always rewatch. Like Living Single is really one of those like comfort shows, like how we consider like Golden Girls and all those like
Mhm.
other type shows. Like I just watch, I just put it on. Like I don't even have to be looking at it because it's like I know every episode, all the scenes and stuff. Cause it's like
Right.
you rewatch it so much. So it's always been like that comfort show. And like I say, to have a show where these don't feel like characters, like they feel like they're your family. That's just a testament to how well the chemistry, between them worked as a cast, what they gave to audience, and just all those type of just all those type of things, and to have comedy that can stand the test of time. I've always said that
Mm,
comedy is one of those genres that it can be hit or miss, and then certain comedy, like I know for me, doesn't hit well the same way it may have back in the day. But when you have certain shows like Living Single or things like that, yeah, did they have like their homophobic moments and stuff like that? Like any show. Yeah, they did. But I can still crack up at the same joke the same jokes over and over again, you know
mhm.
because it's not a direct attack on the LGBTQ community. It's just, like for instance, when Regine has that line about if a man is in the room with me more than 5 seconds and he don't stay, he's gay. Duh. Like, that's not when you have a joke like that, that's not a an attack on the queer community. That's just Regine being Regine, So again, certain comedy fades in and out, but there is certain things that are just timeless and they're classic. And no matter how many times you hear it, you still crack up at the same things.
Mhm.
And that's what they gave us.
Exactly. All right. So this episode went way longer than either of us expected.
No, but it's all good because the people that listen to us, they stick with us throughout.
Right. Well, is there any last words that you would like to share before I close this out?
No, just thank all of you so much for tuning in. We hope that we talked about some good things, that you enjoy listening to us, and if you don't, fake it. Still click the
Right.
like button and subscribe.
I said, well, before we close out, again, happy Mother's Day, everybody. So yeah, this is not going to be a rewatch podcast, but I'm just letting y'all know now, because I do enjoy that show. If it's a week where I have absolutely nothing, I will be talking about the rewatch. Just so y'all know, it was going to be a conversation about reliving single. So be prepared. But with that said, thank you all for tuning in to Melanin and Moonlight, your late night space for deep, thought-provoking conversations about sex, culture, and the well-being of the Black community. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the podcast to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep the vibes flowing and your mind open. Bye, y'all.
Bye.